everyone, and welcome to the Mental Podcast with me, your host, Matthew Ashford. I'm a registered and chartered sport and exercise psychologist from the UK, and I've worked in elite sport and esports for the past 5 years. And that was the reason for this podcast series. I wanted to understand the mental side of competition from speaking to coaches, players, and parents who live and breathe that experience themselves. So without any further ado, let me introduce you this week's guest. Today we have Shourdy. Shourdy is a professional League of Legends player from Portugal. Shourdy has competed in the EU circuit for the last 3 years in both Portugal and France. In 2024, Shourdy competed in the EU Masters, which is a major regional tournament in League of Legends where the upcoming stars make their name. And currently, Shourdy is the top laner for Dynamo Eclot in the top level Czech and Slovakian league and is continuing to advance his career. So, Shourdy, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me here.
Lovely.
It's a big pleasure to talk about myself, and it's it is a big honor for me to be here.
Yeah, absolute privilege for us as well. Shourdy, a good place to start maybe is to hear a bit more about your background. And so maybe talk about how you got into League in the beginning and maybe your early journey in the competitive scene.
So to introduce myself a bit, my name is Shourdy, as you said before. I'm currently 19. I started League back in season 7, so like roughly 6 years ago, maybe 7, around that similar. I started League because my father used to play League, like on before League wasn't even a game, like it was just a beta and everything. And I did play back then when I was like 6, but I didn't really enjoy League, you know. So before it was just more of a I just played it because he told me to play it, and then eventually I did play a lot of Dota, which led me to play League as like in a game of when I was tired of Dota, and I fell in love with League after that, and since like I made my main account, which is 2019. I started playing League like non-stop. Like that's when I started playing like 1,000 games per season.
Wow.
I really started like enjoying the game, and it was around that time I also played competitive. Not really as a goal. I just played for fun because I got called, and then eventually it grew into actually you may want to do this like as a career. Just happened to be at my doorstep when I wasn't expecting it.
Yeah.
Um, for some of my background, I do also do jiu-jitsu. Um, I'm still a white belt though, after like 6 years, but I feel like that's doesn't really matter that much. It's more for the experience anyway. Other than that, I played competitive for 3 years, as you said before. I mostly played in LP Low, which is the Portuguese ERL, and I did also play like I played every league. So I played third division, which is where you get to the second division. Second division played for like 1 year, and then first division I only played for 2 splits. And we did get into EU Masters, one of those splits. And although we lost horribly at EU Masters, but it is kind of expected since not only is LPL kind of a lower tier end for ERLs, EU Masters is a bit too much for like a team like that I had before, including myself. Now I feel like I'm more confident, but I didn't get an opportunity to really play there. And now I was playing for the Czech League, and I did also play for LFL for like very little amount of time. And I'm kind of looking for a team now, since my split just finished. And yeah, I think that's it. I'm just currently looking for a team. I do have some experience, but I feel like I'm still really far off. And yeah, that's it for me.
Yeah. Well, really diverse range of experience. We can get into all of that. You've got one more belt more than me. So even if you're still, white belt for 6 years, that's still a great achievement. League, right? So, at first you didn't like League, right? And you only played it really because your dad kind of got you into it. Or kind of sound like a forced you to play, right? But then in 2019, something changed and you fell in love with League. And is that what you put down to go and compare? Because it sounds like you kind of just fell into the competitive scene organically just for the sheer love of the game. So what is it about League that you fell in love with that maybe you didn't fall in love with in like Dota, for example?
Back then I still thought, because I did play League at the same time as Dota, and I still thought Dota was way better than League. Like I thought League was really bad. But then after I tried it a second time, something just clicked, and I just thought this game is so good, you know. So I naturally stopped playing Dota altogether just to play League. And even back then, I was playing a lot, but I wasn't playing that much. It was 2019 when I made my main account because I did have two accounts before this account, as my current name, Shourdy. I started playing so much on that account that I pretty much like managed to rank up, managed to do a lot of things. I got master by then, right? And then one of my friends who used to play competitive asked me if I want to play for a team, and I said sure, because at that time I wasn't really like I was really young, right? I was 14, so I wasn't really thinking about anything. So it was just more of like, oh sure, I can do it. It must be fun, right? And then I played
Yeah.
it, and then we had some success, and then some stuff happened, and then I was like, okay, I had a good time, right? And some people called me to play competitive again, so I just thought like, yeah, I should do this, right? Because I feel like I have nothing to lose from this. And then after a while, like once I finished my competitive experience, I decided to like play competitive myself, like look for a team myself, because I was generally like I generally felt like it was fun and it was also kind of an experience for me because not as a career necessarily, but as a player, like as an experience, like to get better at the game. Because at that time I still didn't think like it could be a career until up to a point where I started like playing LPLOL and I played at the first division, which then, well, you're still like not at a level that's like a career. You still, it's like it's at least something. You still get paid a little bit, and you still have some experience. So at that point, I was already starting to think maybe I could focus on this like as a job. Although I was not expecting that much from myself, especially after I got U Masters. Like I was getting even more confident about my chances, climbing the ladder. So
And
it's
and
more
how
like a
old were you when
natural
you went
progression.
to? Oh, sorry, I was going to say, how old were you when you went to the EE Masters? Because you were 14 in 2019. So
So I'm not actually. It should have been 16 or 17, around
right,
that.
right.
Although that sounds very impressive, it is because, of course, LPLOL is kind of a. I'm not gonna say it's very easy to win, but since I won LPLOL and winning LPLOL is not necessarily like too hard for most players. Well, competitive players. I'm assuming competitive players, right? So it's kind of a easy ticket to get in. But at the same time, I'm not saying it's like super easy because it is not. But at the same
Mm,
time, that just allowed me to get in very early to most people. And of
yeah.
course, we didn't have the best experience there, but it's normal. As a team that was pretty amateur, like very amateur.
Yeah, I think sometimes the league that you compete in kind of prepares you for EU Masters, isn't it? If the LP and the LP League wasn't particularly at the highest level, then it's hard, isn't it, to go from that level that you're competing at to the really high level in the EU Masters. But it's still a great achievement nonetheless. Um, so you were very young, right? So you were 15, 16 when you went to EU. So how was that experience for you? Because if we think about like elite sport, for instance, so you'll have athletes maybe watch this who, you don't typically play at the professional level until you're like 19, 20, right? So you're a young lad at 15, 16 competing in these leagues. Was there a different mindset back then to competing than maybe you have now? And what was the mindset? Because was it different as you went up the levels? Do you notice differences in competing?
Yeah, especially. Right? Because, like, so, especially at the start, most people just treat it as a hobby or just for fun. Like, and that's the truth. Like, of course, everyone wants to win, obviously. But most people didn't really care that much. Like, even if we lose, it's just like, it's a fun. It's the fun to play. It's a fun experience. Like, to play as a team, like, it feels really nice, right? And even playing, like, stuff like scrims, like, we're not too attached to that, right? Just yet. After my like the first division split is when I started like, okay, maybe this is like a bit more serious because at that point things do like ramp up a little. Like it's not insane amounts, but you are scrimming more often. You're doing more team planning. You are talking about the game more. You are focusing on solo queue. You're focusing on how we can do drafts, how you can improve, maybe do reviews. It's like it's starting to get a bit more serious, but I still had like lots of fun with it. And then after we won, it's like, and the following split after that, and you masters, like, I started figuring out maybe just like I have to actually be serious about this, you know? Because
Mm.
the more you climb up and the more like enemies become more difficult and everything, and like the stakes get higher, you start feeling naturally like, well, it is still fun for me, of course, and it should be
Mm.
as always, but it starts being more serious, like as an actual, sport, like actually feels like a tournament where you are completely focused on it. And I still have fun, of course, but it's just more of a, instead of a laid back approach that I used to have, especially at the start, it's more of
Mm.
become like as a main focus now. It's not a hobby anymore. It's more like a job. Like I actually try looking forward to how can I improve, how can I do better, right? Than
Mm.
necessarily just to enjoy the ride, which I was
Mm.
doing before.
Yeah, and it sounds like the enjoying the ride was almost what kept you going back to competitive and really playing in the beginning, didn't it? Because you were just scrimming and you weren't too attached to sort of like the win or loss, But as you sort of got better and it kind of became more serious, it sounded like you had to start thinking a lot more about the details that go in. So, given like the enjoyment of the game was so important to your motivation then, how do you find the balance? How do you manage to get your enjoyment in, even though the game is, like you say, it's more serious? And maybe for the people who, maybe you can give people a bit of a sneak peek behind the curtain of a professional player. Is what is the demands on a pro player at the higher levels in regards to what they've got to do day in day out, and that seriousness.
I mean, I feel like the main like the main point that attracts like most people, like being a pro player, is very nice for just a very specific reason, which is when you play on the you even if you play on the stage, like just online, it doesn't really matter, right? But especially when you play for like an audience, right? It,
Mm.
it is very exciting to get people to either like chant your name, right? Like people to say you're good or you're doing something good, or to like do something for you, right, in chat, or just like show any support. But at the same time, it's the opposite, right? If you underperform, you'll get people like calling you bad, people calling you maybe this player should be benched. So it's a bit of
Yeah.
like a 50-50 in terms of you get a lot from having people watch you, and you also kind of get a lot of out of experiences. But I feel like that's what motivates people is to play good and hear people like support you. You know, it's just
Mm.
having that people like having an audience and just playing well, and you get rewards. But at the same time, you just have that pressure because the more, especially the higher you go, the stakes are higher, and you are more pressure to do well, not just because you want to win, but because your reputation is like kind of on the line at that point. So you
Mm.
don't want to disappoint anyone, of course, and you also don't want to disappoint your teammates and everyone else.
Mm.
So
Yeah,
it's a
for
bit
sure. Like
stressful,
I say,
but it's very
yeah.
rewarding when you do manage.
Mm. How do you find that high risk, high reward sort of lifestyle, isn't it? With as you go up higher the leagues, obviously you get a reputation and you've got to maintain that or feel like you need to maintain that because you don't want to let people down. And the praise can be lovely, but then there's the flip side of that, isn't it? How do you find that as a player? And maybe also from your experience, how do you find other players deal with that level of pressure?
I mean, I obviously still with the pressure, but I feel like I'm pretty contained. I don't really get affected too much by people like trying to bring me down. But at the same time, I feel like I'm not exactly the type of person that would get improved massively to impress people, like impress my own audience. I feel like I'm just more focused on playing better just for myself, which
Mm.
which does work. And I feel like if you just play for yourself with no regards to anyone else, you usually do better. Not
Mm.
saying you shouldn't like cater to your audience. I
Yeah.
do like to do my own picks and everything. Sometimes, for the show, not even for improvement altogether, but and I feel like that's how most players manage it. They kind of have to split their attention of they have to focus pretty much on themselves. Like like, regardless of what people are saying, because most people, like good or bad, like advice, most of them are just like they don't understand, right? Which they shouldn't, of course, because they're like a viewer. They don't really understand what's going on behind the scenes. So you just focus on yourself, and you pretty much just try to do the best you can. And you know, of course, you can get affected by their words, like just like in your mindset. But at the end of the day, nothing really matters unless you lose or win, like your competitive games. So that's all you have to focus on realistically. And then what comes after that is, how you deal with it. If it's a loss, then you just have to deal with it and go forward. If it's a win, then you can enjoy the win for until you lose next time.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? It's like I love to read the comment section when we've won a game and maybe log off when it maybe hasn't gone so well. But I mean, there's some really good points that you make that I'd like to maybe elaborate on. The first being to focus on yourself, right? Because I think this is really good advice for other players across games, because this is a common issue with players across games that they all have to deal with, which is, having fans, and either fans of the org or fans who followed them throughout their career, and they always want to do them proud. So how do you manage to focus on yourself, and what do you do particularly that you think, if you can see yourself slipping into that focus on that attention on maybe what people think, have you got something you do that helps you to bring yourself back to yourself, so that helps you to deal with it mentally?
I mean, if I'm feeling kind of down in the sense that if I feel like I'm getting too much hate, it probably means that I'm doing something wrong. Like what I just do is maybe not the best approach, but I just like to play solo queue until I get like the pinnacle of like what I can do, like very, very, very high, until I'm playing at a level that I'm very, very like satisfied with, like a bit of an extreme, but like not that solo queue really matters that much. But if I get like a very high level of solo queue and translate that to people saying like I'm decent, like streamers or whatever, I feel like a bit more reassured, and then I can go back to performing, and then I will see results. At least it worked for me because I feel like when I'm like bad at this point or when I'm getting flamed, it's usually because I'm not playing well, like in like an individual level. Because in competitive, like when you play as a team, you don't really notice people like flaming you that much. It's just like if I make like 1v1 misplay or I completely misplay mechanically, like people are like, "Oh, what is this guy doing? He's trolling," right?
Yeah.
But like if I make a bad rotation, people know, "Oh, this guy is completely messing up his teamwork." Like it's more of a individual thing. So I just try to focus like my individual skill to its max. But realistically, you should also like focus on reviews, focus on your mistakes, focus on your teamwork, like focus on your team optimization. Because realistically, it's a team game, especially in competitive. Like just playing by yourself is not going to win the game. But I just like to improve that, so I bet I do the best show I can. I play the best I can, and it translates into people liking me more. And I mean, I'm well known for being like of a kind of a person that plays by himself, which is I'm not sure if it's a good thing or bad thing, but
Well,
it
I'm
is
sure it has its
something.
perks, right? Yeah, it always going to be a balance between playing for the team and playing for yourself. And I don't know, loads about League, but I know that top laner can be a bit sometimes more of an isolated position in a
It
team.
is isolated by nature, but that doesn't mean that you are locked out of the game. It just means that for some for most part of the game, laning phase especially, you are kind of by yourself. But that doesn't mean you don't have any impact. It just means you have less than other lanes.
Ah.
I mean, that's why I
Well,
love top lane though, right? For the
yeah,
for the pure isolation. No
yeah.
one's going to stop you most of the time, which is good.
Mm. As I'm saying, I think there's a bit of an onus on being good individually, because it's important at times during the match, isn't it? And so the rebound strategy you have there, that idea of kind of going in a solo queue, getting yourself to a really high level, it sounds like it's like feeling like, oh no, I am good at this game, right? I can prove to myself that I can play really well, and then like you say, people notice, and that kind of makes you feel a bit better, doesn't it? Because it's like it's not all bad, I can do these things. So with that, when a performance isn't going so well, do you go into solo queue to work on those things? And like work on certain things that you think could be better, and what guides you in that? Because from my experience that sometimes players can, you can hear what the fans say you need to work on, and then you've got what your coaches say, and you've got what your teammates say, and also you've got your own opinion about what could be worked on. So what do you guide your sort of practice on?
Well, in general, right? When push comes to shove and everyone's telling me different things, like I'm gonna trust myself first. Like, what do I think actually is gonna help me here? Because I don't want to diminish like anyone. Because I'm sure when people say different things, they at least have something on value to get from. But that doesn't mean it's gonna solve your problem necessarily. Because I did try following like other people's advice, and it's not bad. But I feel like you have to balance a bit between. First, you need to do your own thing. You need to figure, okay, what I'm doing wrong. How can I improve this, right? And I feel like if you just hop into a solo queue with no mentality, you're not gonna do anything just for the just for the sake of playing the game and doing well. So you need to come with a mindset of I need to improve this, I need to fix this, or I need to play like this. Secondly, I think the coach especially, or at least like I don't know if you have an analyst or just a coach or like someone who like does one-on-one to you, it's very important that you listen to them usually because they should have pretty good takes, assuming it's a decent coach, and that will give you like pointers to what you should like. Not necessarily like hard solution, just pointers. Like maybe you should focus on your like on your lane state. Maybe you should focus on flanking. And it's like it makes you think, and then you do your own like assessment of what it means. I need to improve my flanking. What does that mean for me? It means maybe I should play more champions like that can flank. Maybe it means more. Maybe I should practice champions that can flank and do flanking in my own solo queue games like as often as possible, just to practice it. And then you have your fans, and although most of them are like kind of you know nonsense, sometimes you do get some good advice, and it could be simple stuff like you keep doing the same mistake over and over because since you're a viewer, they can notice your tendencies. Like if they
Yeah.
say, "Oh, you're dying to a gank," like every game you're dying to a gank. You die level 3 every game, right? And I'm gonna like look into that. Am I actually dying level 3 every game? And if I'm dying level 3 game, I'll just avoid dying. Like I just don't die for the level 3, which I'll practice. It's so you just kind of need to balance between all three, but you don't really need to pay too much attention of like trying to get something from all of them. Like all that matters really is you feel satisfied that you learned something from like your previous mistake. It's less
Yeah.
about fixing all your mistakes and it's more about getting something from what you did before. So if I played really bad in it, like any game, competitive game, and I did a lot of mistakes, I just need to fix one to feel satisfied. Because fixing all of them is unrealistic for all players. Otherwise, we'd all be like the pinnacle of league
Yeah.
players.
Yeah. No, that's the thing, is it? No improvement is a waste of time. And it's interesting as well because working in league a bit, how do you find the difference of opinions? So sometimes I've noticed that a coach can have an opinion on what they think a player should work on. Maybe there's a team strat that maybe favors certain champions, right? But maybe a player isn't as confident on those champions. So that feels like a reality in league at the highest level. So how do you have you had experience of that, and sort of how do you navigate that as a player in terms of having your ideas about what's going to get the best out of you in the game, but like also having to cater for what the team and maybe the coach think is also best.
Of course, what I just said, it's in alignment with like when your coach, your team is like in alignment with your like thinking. But it does happen when you want to do something and your coach wants to do something and your team wants to do something else. In that case, you're kind of stuck in two places because you don't really disobey them, but you don't want to really do what they want because sometimes what is best for the team is not the best for you. So I usually try to figure some stuff out. Like first, if my coach wants me to do something that I don't really understand or I don't really agree with, then I'm not gonna do it just because he told me to, right? I will try, right, as I said before. But if I don't understand it, I'm not gonna do it because it makes no sense for me to try like something that I don't actually know how to do. Like if he tells me to play a champion that regardless of how I practice, I just don't understand, right? I feel like I'm
Mm,
just better off just doing what I usually do. But at the same
mm,
time, if his strategy is not like me, like it's not something I usually do, but at the same time, like I feel like I can connect something with it. Like he says, "Oh, you can play Rumble, right?" And although I'm not a fan of Rumble, I practice him and I get a good enough level that applies to the team, right? And then I start playing Rumble more, which works. But at the same time, if you told me to play Jace, I can't play Jace. Like no matter how I spin it, I just cannot play Jace. Like I don't know, it's something in my brain that I just can't. So even though my coach really wants me to, and my team kind of like wants to play around that, I just can't do it. So we have to adapt to what I cannot do, right? And I think that's how I work, and most people kind of work in those competitive
yeah.
things. You need to
And I think
balance
that's the thing, isn't
between
it?
what can you do and what your
Yeah.
coaches want and what you want to do.
Mm,
It's not just like,
yeah.
for example, if I want to practice something on my own accord, I can tell my coach, and I'll give him like a chance. Like if he likes it, then I won't do it. If he doesn't like it, I won't do it. I'm not gonna force him to. Oh, but I want to play this, right?
Mm,
It's just like
mm,
just giving him something to like think about. Like if he wants me to try this pick out, I can pick it. If he doesn't, or we don't pick it. That's usually how the team
mm,
goes.
mm. Yeah, it just shows, doesn't it, that coaches have also got to think about the players as much. I think there's a lot of emphasis on flexibility and versatility, but at the same time, there are your strengths, and you want to go into a game feeling confident. With whatever you're playing. So no, and it's an interesting thing that I've noticed throughout league. Um, it'd be good to talk a bit about what you said there on what coaches can do to gain your trust, because I think that's the other part of it that I've noticed with coaches is there's ways of getting you to buy in, right? So you mentioned about understanding. Would that be the crucial thing for you? That if a coach was going to come to you with a certain champion or a certain way, that it's really about how it kind of makes sense to you?
I mean, it's more like how it comes together, because like sometimes what you want to do has to align with with like something with me. Because if it doesn't have anything to do with me, then regardless of like how good something is, if I can connect with it, then I'm as good as like nobody. Like sure, I
Mm,
might be like really good player on my own, but if you it's like trying to compare like try to do something like a tank player to play like a super carry and then expecting them to like, oh yeah, I can play this, right? Like they're not gonna be like, I have no idea what I'm doing, right? Like even though you can like be flexible and do a lot of things, sometimes like it's completely like out of your league. Like it's something that you cannot do, right? I mean, I feel like that's why most people tend to stick to a couple of roles and stuff. You often don't see like a tank player that also plays carries, that also plays pocket picks, like strange pocket, like tech picks, and then he also like, he does everything. He's a very good carry player. He's a very good supportive carry. He's a very good weak side. It's mostly just one of or two of them. You don't get all three, you know. So when coaches want something, he has to have something to do with you. Of course you can like try it out, like even if you don't feel like you'll like do well with what they're saying, you still try just to get a feel. But if it doesn't work, you just give it up. You don't like brute force it, because I've tried. It doesn't really work for you, because you do want to try, because you never know, sometimes it works, but at the same time you don't want to hit your head over and over to see if you can like eventually learn it. I feel like it's better to give it a shot and align with if you want or not to do it. If you feel like you're confident on it. If I'm not confident, I just skip it. And my coaches usually like agree with it, because it's nonsensical to waste too much time on something that it's not going to work, obviously.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is it? The amount of time you've got to put into the game, you want to be putting it into what you find productive and that's going to actually lead you to get better, right? And so there's not a lot of like leeway to be focusing on those things that you feel like you're just, like say, hitting your head against a brick wall for. So it's a really interesting look at the realities of being coached as well, isn't it? And that they've always got to fit the tactics around the players and their strengths. Um, so a couple of questions then, actually, I want to ask you, Chowdhury, on first one is on your overall mental approach to playing. And you mentioned at the beginning jiu-jitsu. Um, And I believe, did you play chess as well?
A bit, but I wouldn't say it affects my gameplay too much. I feel like my
Yeah.
gameplay is the opposite of chess. It's the opposite of strategic planning, you know.
Ah, okay. Maybe chess kind of taught it out of you. Nah, but so it'd be nice to understand maybe how that's influenced your mental approach to playing jujitsu. And because I think that'd be nice for people to hear that maybe it's not just your experience playing league that influences you, but maybe there's things outside of league that also does help you to become a better player too.
I feel like mentality side of league is probably the most important part for most people. Sometimes all it takes is how you approach the game, and I feel like the most difficult part of playing competitive it's that mental aspect. Like even just entering the game, playing a competitive game, like inside the game, you're really nervous. Like could be
Mm,
the opponent, could be like your expectations on you. Maybe someone's expecting something of you, and it is a lot of pressure sometimes. And it's also like if you play competitive, especially at the start, if I did a bad, really bad mistake and I died, I'll be thinking, oh, like what does this do, right? And my brain's I'm gonna linger on the mistake for the rest of my game. So I feel like you kind of have to have a really strong mentality when it comes to playing. It doesn't really matter if you're competitive, right? Solo queue also you need a strong mentality, but competitive really brings out of you because there is a lot of people watching. You're kind of stressed out by the expectations, and you're supposed to uphold a reputation. You're supposed to uphold like an image. If people just see you as a dirty enter, then your mind's gonna crumble.
mm,
I feel like
mm,
jujitsu is kind of like something that helps me quite a bit just to connect something with league because jiu-jitsu is like in essence it's all about discipline, it's all about very like calm, it's about a very calm like mentality because when you're doing jiu-jitsu you're fighting someone, right? Or even if you're doing techniques, you're practicing with someone, but you need to be focused, so you need to do it perfectly, at least
mm,
in a realistic scenario, right?
mm,
So when I'm doing jiu-jitsu, right, I'm pretty much like it's like what Faker does. It pretty much like erase some of those emotions, right? Because that's what the most effective. So I kind of got a bit of that from Jiu-Jitsu. Regardless if I win or lose, I don't really show like I'm not really happy, but I'm not really sad. Like either way, because you pretty much like hide those feelings a bit by just focusing on the game itself.
mm,
So if you want to play a competitive game, your first focus should be playing the game first. Your second focus should be, of course, whatever happens after the game or during the game. If you die, you die. If you make a mistake, you can review it afterwards, right? If
mm,
if even if you win, you can of course be very happy that you won, but you need to make sure it's not like early celebration. You need to learn from the game first, even if you win, and then you can celebrate afterwards, right? That's
mm,
why like sometimes you don't see like unless it's like worlds or stuff. When someone wins, they're not gonna like jump out of like joy, because they still have to hold themselves a bit before they can really like enjoy the victory. And I feel like
mm,
jiu-jitsu it's more of like a tie-in for how I think about league because
mm,
the way you think about league changes with like your personal experience, right? Like
mm,
it's all about how you think in real life that will affect your league, which is obvious. So if you do a sport, you mostly like start thinking about the the game in some sport terms, or even if you do stuff like, my brother does like coding and everything, and he can think about the league about more of like a strategic sense. Like
mm,
since he does a lot of like like automated stuff, he can think of like a more of automated approach to the game, where everything just falls into place. I mean, my playstyle, right? It's more of a like it just happens, It's like as you said, like it's opposite of chess. Instead of strategic planning and like it just happens. It's spontaneous, right? Like
mm,
I just feel like doing a play. There's no like strategic planning. It's just like it just happened to me that I'm just saying something, right? And I'm doing it. And in a way, it's like similar to jiu-jitsu. And in a fight, of course, in an ideal world, you want everything to be like, I'll do this, and he counters, and I do this, right?
Mm,
But realistically, what happens in a fight is, oh, he's passing my guard like randomly, right? I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this, right? And
mm,
in a way, it's a lot of more of a counter reactive like kind of mentality. Like your
mm,
opponent will something, you will do something, and you will answer with your own counter, right? And of course, you have to be
mm,
ready for it. And in League, it's kind of the same thing. My opponent plays like some way, can be anywhere, right? And he's gonna do eventually one mistake, and I'm gonna try to counter it. And if he counters my mistake, right, I counter his, and vice versa. It's more of a like a reactive approach. But I,
mm,
I feel like even though that is like a very peculiar kind of game plan, because usually when you be proactive in making enemy mistakes, I still like to just play in that kind of jiu-jitsu style where I just do a lot of random plays in a sense that
mm,
it's more it just comes to me at the moment, and my opponent does also a lot of like mistakes which I just take advantage of instead of necessarily playing like the game in more like a methodic approach. Like, instead
mm,
of like I'm gonna slow push this wave and then I'm gonna cheat a recall in 3 waves, then I'm gonna get an item advantage, then I'm gonna trade, and then I'm gonna recall, not in that sense. It's more like
mm,
I'm pushing the wave. This guy uses his like ability wrong. I'm gonna punish it. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna reset, and this guy messes up his timer by trying to cancel me.
mm,
It's not exactly the easiest approach to do since you don't really have a plan to begin with. It's kind of hard to align yourself with how you wanna win. But when it does
mm,
work, it does work.
mm. Yeah, and it sounds like it's really adaptive as well, isn't it? It's not so like you say mechanical and thought out, but what I guess the strength of it is that you can pounce on someone's mistake very quickly and think on your feet really quickly as well. Do you know what I mean? So it has great advantages, and it just shows that by doing a martial art like jiu-jitsu, that can train you in an almost completely different way of viewing the game that you would have had if you just played League. And just to back on your first point is about the self-control as well. It sounds like that because it's interesting, isn't it? Jiu-jitsu, it's sort of like counterintuitive. You have to fight and be calm at the same time, right? Which they sound very counterintuitive. But do you think that calmness under pressure is why you've got that level of self-control, and that when you're in a competition now, you don't try and get carried away by the emotions, always keep some distance from them?
I mean, of course, like it's inevitable that you will show emotion, right, when you're playing. But as you say, like in jiu-jitsu, it's about self-control because there's nothing wrong in a fight in like showing heart, right? Most people like sometimes have like one of my friends especially has like a big heart in a sense that like what it actually means is like in a fight he shows a lot of emotion, right? And that can be good because like you can get like spontaneous like strength just from like the emotions, you can like get
Mm,
fired up by the emotions, but that also has a like insane downside, which is like at the same time you could get like fired up and it would lead you to make a mistake because you're like hyped up. Because like the shy, for example, you've seen like his Aatrox, he was doing a 1v2, right? And he dodges like an insane gank. He like 1v2 is completely, he's insane, right? He smurfed that.
mm,
And then he dies like 3 seconds later because he walks up like randomly because he's too fired up from like, bro, what does that do, right? So good, right?
mm,
And then he just makes a mistake because he's like all fired up from his like previous play. It's like that sense, right? You need
mm,
to be calm because regardless of how you play, like if even if you're very good, you need to be calm because sure you're doing very well, but you can't really celebrate, right? You need to
mm,
focus up until the end. Even after you win, you need to be like slightly calm just until you can like really really show what you actually did, right? So in a
mm,
fight, being calm is best because regardless of like how the fight is go, even if it's very intense, right? You need to be rational about everything. And although
mm,
having heart does help you sometimes, like I said, like being fired up sometimes helps like win. Because at the same time, of course, if you lose, right, there's also a big part. When if you lose, you need to be like not in despair, right? You need to
mm.
lose with grace, right? In jiu-jitsu,
Yeah.
there's very little about losers, you know? Like people usually lose with grace. They don't lose with like they don't get pissed, you know? They don't get like they don't lose with like a sad face and just walk away. They lose with like pride, you know? You need to kind of kind of learn how to lose with pride. Because if you're not
Mm,
like proud of how you lost, then that's fine. Just improve next time. But you don't want to like
mm,
show how you show how you really hated how you lost, right? You don't
mm,
finish on stage, and you don't be like swearing or like saying you know you could blame your team, you could blame yourself, right? It doesn't really matter. You don't want to you don't want to show how the loss affects you because it does make you look weak as well, right? Just like mental wise. So I feel like that self
mm,
control is really important. Like even if you're not playing the game, it's like it's a bit of both, right? It's in and out of game.
mm,
Like you need to be focused in the game, but you also need to not show a lot of emotion outside of the game because you know the
mm.
components that can advantage they can take advantage of that. You could say an opponent is bad first before the game just to get a bit in the head, you know?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. But I like that as well. There's always like I love that telling you, lose with grace. Always doing a respectful way that comes across like you're even losing strong, in some ways, right? Because you're not showing it getting to you, even though you may feel that way within you. Very stoic in some ways, right? So I guess just quickly, do your teammates look to you to be the level head? Then is that something that maybe you've gained a reputation from over time? Because you sound like you're very kind of cool and don't get too high or too low.
Like I am known for being a level head. Like I don't really show much emotion like either way, right? In my early days, like you've seen a lot of people when you win, like they like scream and like you know, like in a victorious way, which I mean nothing wrong with that, you know. But I'm usually very you know I start the game with like let's win this guys, and I win the game with okay guys we won, right? Kind of mentality, which is good. But at the same time, I'm not. There's nothing wrong with people being fired up, especially after they win. But you can be a bit distracting, especially when you play something like a best of five. Like getting one game, get a hold of yourself is very bad. Like just because you won two games, even two games in a best of five doesn't mean you won the third, right?
Yeah,
So it is good to
yeah,
have that mentality. But I am
it
also
makes
known for, you know, as I said before, even though I'm calm, it doesn't mean that my gameplay is like methodic sometimes, right? It's a bit more it's a bit more all over the place. So it is a bit weird having someone like calm demeanor just doing very peculiar plays, you know, as you
I
say
think
it.
they complement each other, don't they? I think because you're quite controlled in yourself, it probably allows you to be spontaneous. You know what I mean? And make sort of it's still kind of calculated. Um, but I think it just shows as well that teammates always have to be aware of their own personalities and how that influences the team as well. Because, like you say, you can always celebrate after you've won the series, not necessarily when you're 2-0 up. So great. So for time, wow, this has gone so quick. But my final question, Shourdy, which I always ask people, is if you were to speak to your 12-year-old you and give them one bit of advice you'd want them to know, which you think would set them up for having a career in league, what would that be?
I mean, I feel like, especially now, like, of course, I feel like extremely old at 19. So back then, like, of course, I was like very bad by my standards now. And I feel like if I had to give one piece of advice, it would just be to focus on like I know it sounds kind of like a bit ironic, but focus earlier and focus on like playing pro earlier, just as soon as possible, right? I feel like even though I'm like kind of young as far as like pro players go, it's all about time. The more time you have to practice, the more time you have experience, like the better you'll do. And it's not even necessarily about the you know about the like gameplay, like how you play, like because of course I'm not gonna improve that early even back then, but just playing competitive, like even at 12, which sounds ridiculous by the way, but the more advantage you have in experience, like 5 6 years of experience by the time of 18, that would be crazy, right? It would be like unstoppable. So if I had any advice, just if you want to play competitive, just do it as hard as you can. I mean, you could be like 20, it doesn't really matter. If you do want to play competitive, you have to get a head start because in essence, competitive is all about experience. You could be the best player, you could be rank one, if you have zero competitive experience, you could still lose to like someone like the likes of me. That's because your team doesn't know how to play. Just you know how to play by yourself, and you know how to play with a team that plays by itself. Don't know how to play in a team environment. So I would recommend you starting as early as possible. And I did want to start as early as possible, but I never knew I had this passion to begin with, right?
Mm.
So I'm a bit sad about that, but I did get a head start compared to most people, so I can't really be sad about it.
Mm. Well, I think it's incredibly wise words. And like you said, we always look back and think there's things we could have been done. But I guess this is for the future generation coming through that, take this on board. We want to become professional league players. Like, this is fantastic. Do you know what I mean? Because this will give them the advantage, like you said, that they need maybe when they're earlier. And they'll definitely message you and thank you in a few years' time when it's paid off for them. So, Shourdy, it's been an absolute pleasure having on the podcast. Loved every minute of it. And, yeah, if people wanted to contact you or they wanted to go watch you, where could they find you?
I do have a Twitter, right? Which you can contact me at any time. That's usually how people contact me if it's on Discord. But Discord is usually more for like matters that that's like if you have a business thing, right? But like if you just want to talk to me, like regardless of like who you are, you can just talk me to Twitter. Like it's not a big deal. I usually respond to wherever you are. So if you do want to contact me, it's Shourdy Lol on Twitter
Okay,
or
great.
Shourdy for Discord.
Brilliant. All right. I'm sure there will be a few people. Well, thanks, Shourdy.
Perfect.
Thank you for your time. Been absolutely lovely.
All right, thanks for having me here. It was a big pleasure to talk about myself. And I feel like even though I'm not the most experienced player, I feel like I'm hoping someone learns from like experiences and from what I just talked about today. Hopefully
Mm.
it's useful to someone.
Mm. Oh, you've dropped some absolute gems, so I'm pretty sure they will. Thanks, Shourdy.